Hello and welcome to the Economic Lens. I'm your host, Krish Mehta, and I'm thrilled to have you join me here on this journey where we dive deep into the world of business, economics, and finance. As a high schooler with a passion for understanding what makes businesses tick, we've created this podcast to bring you closer to the minds that drive success in today's competitive business landscape. I'm elevated to have you all join me here on our second episode of our series, Retail and Tech Giants Blueprints for Success. Again, as was the case in our previous episode, we'll be sitting down with some of the most accomplished CEOs, founders, and industry leaders in retail and tech. These are the titans who are shaping our very future with groundbreaking strategies, innovative perspectives, and unparalleled growth. So we'll dive into their journeys, uncovering the challenges they've faced and the strategies that set them apart, as well as the visionary thinking that drives their success. So without further ado, let's introduce our very special guest here today, Mr. Nitin Chhabra, the co-founder and CEO of Ace Turtle, an absolute pioneer in entrepreneurship and someone who's built the company from the ground up. This is someone who is single-handedly built India's leading, tech-native retail company, which is currently, spearheading the retail industry's next phase of transformation. So it is an absolute pleasure to be interviewing you here today to discuss some of the most relevant questions to an entrepreneur like yourself. So, with that being said, let's jump right into the podcast. So, starting off with your career background, I noticed something very, very interesting. You had originally started your career deep in fashion retail for the first 15 years, and then you actually switched to co-founding and becoming the CEO of Ace Turtle. So, could you share some insights into what that journey was like? What actually inspired you to make this transition after working in the fashion industry for 15 long years?
Well, first, thanks for having me, Krish. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm glad that this next generation is now taking interest in retail because retail is at a amazing confluence of because retail always had data, right? Data has never been a challenge in retail, but I think that we were not able to harness it in the past. But I think with now the tech available, which has become far more democratic, I think it's in a very interesting position right now. So coming to my career, yes, you're right. I spent a lot of time in fashion, and and then my last role was with a very large corporate where I was CEO of a couple of their joint ventures. I was also responsible for negotiating some long-term contracts with international brands to launch them in India. And during these trips, which I would make, the business trips for meeting some of these, global CEOs, the top leadership of these brands, some interesting things would come up. So, for example, what really fascinated me at that point of time, so e-commerce was very new, and most of the, global CEOs, I would say the top management of these global brands was dismissing e-commerce as a fad or, it's not going to sustain and so on and so forth. Whereas, there were some people who were, gung-ho about it, but that number was very small. And there was one particular company. It's a UK-based department store where we were also having some discussions with them. They were already working on the confluence of how do they use their offline store network along with the online. Of course, the tech wasn't there. They were trying to build it themselves. And that's what really fascinated me. Because we always knew that, in India, you have abundant tech talent available.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with the right team, we could create something there. And over a period of time, for me, it was, the brands kept changing over the last 15 years, like you mentioned. But, I just felt it was the same thing. We would end up into the same kind of hurdles, if I may say, because we were on the upper end of the market, when we look at what kind of TG we were targeting. And the upper end of the market, there were those 8 to 10 malls / high streets where you could open stores. At that point of time, there was no department store which will be looking at these kind of, let's say the higher end brands at that point of time. So there was no way you can expand your business. So what I found fascinating was what internet would give us the reach. And then, if we could use the offline distribution, that could become very interesting to do a combination integrating both.
Mm-hmm.
And because we always felt that consumers, will not only buy either online or either offline as it was being, touted at that point of time. We always felt it's going to be at the confluence because sometimes as a consumer, you might want to try offline, something you want to buy online, maybe something new you want to try on online, repeat you want to do something new you want to try offline, new you want to do online, so on and so forth. Because the physical environment delivers to you, the touch and feel, the
Yeah.
instant trials, and the physical of the brand experience. Whereas the online also delivers you in terms of you can have great experiences online, but still it is far more transactional as compared to offline. So we're always very interested that this is what we need to do, and of course we didn't come from a tech background, and so we said, okay, so what we will do is we will jump in. Krish, I'm continuing. You tell me if you want me to stop
No,
because I
no.
saw your
Yeah, yeah.
question,
Please
so
go
I'm
on.
just
Please go
continuing on
on.
that flow.
No,
Yeah.
please go on.
Okay. So then what was interesting for us was that there was no tech which was existing anywhere in the world at that point of time. There were a couple of players who were dabbling in something like
Mm-hmm.
this, but nobody had succeeded. But they were all coming from let's say large organizations globally. One was in US, again a large retailer, and the second one was in UK, another large retailer who were trying something like this. So we said, okay, why don't we build something, build a tech platform in India which we could offer to large brands for them to go omnichannel, and that's how we started our journey. And then we did make some mistakes in the beginning. First on, when we took some angel money from friends and family, we jumped on to hire the team. First, we looked at companies like IBM, etc., very large companies, large product companies
Okay.
to hire. And we realized very quickly that that was not a good decision, because in large companies, people only work on very small, specific things. So they do not have the big picture. And the culture is not as innovative and risk-taking as what we needed for us to build something which was not existing from there on, right? So then, unfortunately, we burnt most of our angel money,
Wow.
in
Okay.
this learning itself. And then, in fact, I made this effort to start meeting some tech founders to understand from them, where do they hire? They were all product companies who were, building something new. And I realized the mistake which we made, that people who are, looking at building innovative products, those kind of folks you would not find in larger organizations, because, innovation requires freedom, and these guys want to have
Exactly.
the freedom
Yeah.
to, do what they want to do. And that's when, I got into those circles, started meeting those people one on one. And of course, as a founder from day one, my last day is still far away, but from day one and so far, I can tell you, you're always selling to somebody or the other.
Yeah.
And I had to sell the proposition of why they should join, leave another company and join here. And what we're trying to do is, something which is very different. And
Right.
fortunately
Right.
for us, we got going. And that's when we launched our first core product, Rubicon. So Rubicon was launched, Rubicon 1. And at that point of time, we were only looking at doing the web stores, which is the brand's own websites, to integrate with our platform, so that the basic proposition we were delivering was that inventory lying anywhere can be published across any channel, and once you get an order from those channels, you can fulfill from anywhere. So that was the proposition. But we first decided to start on the brand's own sites, because that was a controlled environment. You could do it, because the marketplaces, when we went to them, they were actually not very encouraging towards us, because they felt
Okay.
that the unique differentiator was the assortment they carry. And if somebody like us is going to publish that entire inventory across all channels, then there's no differentiator they'll have.
Right.
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 So,
Right.
so there was quite a bit of pushback, from some of these folks. And as things went by, they realized that that doesn't really matter. What matters is the experience they deliver on their platform. But what the plus which we are providing them is that, one, their entire inventory is coming on to their platform, which would not be the case when they were, literally buying from these brands. Second is, there was no working capital pressure on them, because now the brands were doing directly drop shipping. There was no supply chain pressure on their supply chain itself, because
Right.
it
Right.
was
Right.
being fulfilled from stores on from warehouse. So in a
Right.
nutshell, what Rubicon 1 really aced it, if I might use a cliche, is that inventory anywhere, getting published across any channel. You get an order from any channel, online, offline, and we could fulfill from anywhere. So that's
Right.
how we started.
Right.
Our business model was SaaS. SaaS was very new at that point of time. and we had to explain to everybody, what is the SaaS or SaaS. Everybody would, there's
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
ways
Yeah.
to call it.
Yeah.
So we said, okay, all you got to do is you don't pay us anything upfront.
Mm-hmm.
We'll charge you a small integration fee. We take care of the product and also take care of all the upgradation on an ongoing basis, which we don't charge you for, and you have to pay us,
Right.
subscription
Right.
kind of
Right.
fee
So
on an ongoing
if
basis.
I may interrupt you.
Yeah.
So I think throughout your answer, I think there's been this constant hesitation by people when you're moving towards the technology. For example, earlier on you said there was people completely denied the rise in e-commerce, right? So I think a question revolving around e-commerce, having been someone who's worked in the retail industry for more than a decade and a half, I'm pretty sure you've witnessed you've been firsthand witnessing the exponential rise in e-commerce. So to what extent has this e-commerce transformed the fashion retail landscape, and from what it was when you began your journey vis-a-vis what it is right now?
You talk about fashion retail or e-commerce?
Fashion retail, how has e-commerce transformed the landscape in fashion retail, if it has at all?
Got it. So I think, yeah. So I think when e-commerce came along, it was a siloed channel, right? You have
Mm-hmm.
multiple channels at
Mm-hmm.
that point of time in retail.
Mm-hmm.
You had your own retail, which was monobrand retail, brick and mortar. You had these department stores like Shopper Stop, Lifestyle, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Then you, of course, had your traditional mom and pop channel, which were being serviced through these localized distributors. And then you had your own brand website or web store. And then these e-commerce platforms came along, right? So each of them were all siloed channels. I think that's how e-commerce came along in the beginning. And e-commerce specifically, whether it was your own or third-party e-commerce, what it was delivering in the beginning was to say that I'm giving you the reach. That was, definitely a proposition they were providing. I'm giving you an access to a very large catalog to make a choice from. And I think initially they were fighting the whole battle around trust.
Okay.
Because we had a very low penetration of online payments due to various factors. So some of the smart e-commerce companies, specifically Flipkart, pushed the cash on delivery. So cash on delivery always existed, but it was never pushed the way or scaled the way Flipkart really scaled it. So they scaled it up, and then others also joined in, and as a then we had an entire ecosystem where trust was built to say, okay, if you order something online, it is what you see. It also gets delivered. And if you don't like it, you can send it back. So I think also the level of customer service, they took it to a very different level. But it was all siloed. It was one more channel. So I think that's what Retail 1.0 was, where there were different channels which existed. And then what I would call that, and I'm not just calling e-commerce separately because I think it's part of retail. And then what I call is Retail 2.0. What Retail 2.0 did was that's when all these channels started to converge to say, how do we, use the best of both worlds and use the best of, both the networks. And that's, when this whole word omnichannel became quite popular. That was Retail 2.0. So I know there are still a lot of companies which are trying to catch on to the omnichannel bandwagon, but I think retail is moving towards Retail 3.0 is what we feel is where we are today. And what Retail 3.0 is that how can you use technology to make the business far more efficient as compared to what it is, and far more scalable, and more importantly, far more repeatable. And this channel is agnostic of online, offline, is agnostic of channels. And more importantly, I think what this pandemic has taught us that there would be customers' preferences today are changing far more rapidly than before.
Exactly.
So pre-pandemic, it was online was growing, offline was growing. Post-pandemic, we saw suddenly, online had a massive spot of the business. Last 1.5 years, we're seeing that consumers, because they were holed up inside their home for a long time, they want to go out. So you're seeing again, offline is coming back, online is under pressure. And again, new channels are again emerging. So there is live commerce, there is social commerce where some good work has started to happen. And we foresee a lot more is going to happen again, in terms of the number of demand channels. So what, as a business, you're looking at doing is you want to make your business channel agnostic. I think that's very, very important because consumers, unlike enterprises, don't have limitations, right? So you are, getting exposed to so much content every day. Your tastes and preferences are changing, right? On a very, very rapid pace.
Exactly.
And if I look at the fashion industry where we are operating, right, the old world is you plan everything 9-10 months in advance. So I'm going to predict what Krish is gonna, buy, in 10 to 12 months
Yeah.
from now, right? So you see the challenge and the,
Yeah.
the issue in that,
I see that.
kind of a model. Yeah, and then again, your preferences are changing because you want to buy online, you want to buy
Mm-hmm.
offline. The way your decision making is now happening is dramatically also evolving. But what
Mm-hmm.
happens is that enterprises build systems to target for today because what they can see, and as a result, what happens, it doesn't give you flexibility to adapt as quickly as a consumer is adapting. So I think it's
Mm-hmm.
also very important in today's time where the ecosystem of technology, the enterprise tech stack which you build
Mm-hmm.
is far more adaptive and flexible to also adapt and evolve with the consumer. So I think
Correct.
that's
Correct.
again a very very important play.
Right.
So I would say retail 3.0 is now actually already started. I would like to believe we are leading from the front here, and I would
Mm-hmm.
say
Mm-hmm.
one of the companies to lead this, lead this globally. But I think that's where the future of
Mm-hmm.
retail is heading for.
Right. Right.
But it's not channel specific, either online, offline, e-commerce, retail, or anything like that.
Right. Understood. So I guess shifting the focus a little bit here, something something that'll relate a little more to uh the audience that I have in mind, individuals like me. So a question that people like me have, looking up to a successful entrepreneur like yourself, uh how do you identify this gap in the market? How do you identify the need for this tech-driven retail solution? How did you identify that the services that Ace Total was offering initially, the integration of these multiple channels converging into this omni channel, how did you actually go ahead and identify that this was a gap in the market, and that, oh yeah, I can do something about it, and then you went on and founded and set up your own company as Total? How did you identify that specific gap in the industry?
So as I mentioned before, when I would travel, abroad, I would see, how people were trying to dabble with e-commerce. Some were taking it as a challenge, some were embracing it, some were still
Mm-hmm.
trying to figure it out. It wasn't discovery phase for them. And so I felt that in a market like India, where the challenge is, you have limited distribution. It's a very large market and a very diverse market, right? So how do you get access to that market? Because, in India, the more you go deeper, you'll find that even for premium or high premium brands, there is a market exists, but there might be very few customers in that particular market. But that customer set might not be enough for you, or the pool might not be enough for you to set up a brick and mortar store to access them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So online was clearly giving us that kind of a reach. At the same time, at that point of time, we saw that the super premium brands were not selling on online because they have higher price points. And as I mentioned before, they were not even selling on department stores because department stores were not selling those kind of price points at that point of time. So we felt that to have captive inventory, you
Mm-hmm.
know, for a brand who would be a prospective client would become very, very difficult to do because it did not make commercial sense. So
Mm-hmm.
we have to have a common pool of inventory, which becomes fungible for them to use across whichever channels they need to. So that was a
Mm-hmm.
thought of saying, okay, we will integrate the retail stores and also the
Mm-hmm.
fulfillment centers onto our platform
Okay.
so that it gives them that ability of publishing all inventory anywhere and getting an order from anywhere to fulfill from anywhere. So that's
Mm-hmm.
how, the first challenge we thought about, because in
Mm-hmm.
retail, inventory plays a very very big role, and we understand, if is taking time to scale, brands would lose patience because something new. First is to convince them to do it, and second to say, okay, you give me captive inventory, which is large
Correct.
investment from their side.
Mm-hmm.
So we thought, okay, if we have existing pool, it will make it easier for them to take that decision because you're just plugging onto existing pool of inventory and you're getting them additional demand from the same resources. And more importantly, it also solved the fundamental, problem of retail of getting access with the same resources, or getting access to new customers from the same resources. So
Mm-hmm.
that is how the whole idea came about from the beginning. And as we went deeper, there are new use cases we started discovering, and then we started working on it. And then,
Mm-hmm.
the pandemic hit, in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And by 2020, we had become by far the market leaders in the market. For this,
Mm-hmm.
we were the first ones to launch an omni-channel commerce platform.
Mm-hmm.
And then there were others who tried to copy the platform, but they were quite far away because we had a good period ahead of those guys who were both
Mm-hmm.
in terms of time, and hence, we could experiment, fail, and keep building something which were working. So the tech was, way ahead of the market. And then during the pandemic, it was something which nobody had foreseen. And as a startup, when you're building something, you're burning money. and you're always conscious of your runway. And at that point of time, with the sudden, complete our revenue became nil, because in the first lockdown, if you recall, the government stopped any fulfillment or any logistics or deliveries of any lifestyle goods, because the government
Right.
wanted to
Right.
use
Right.
the
Right.
entire logistics network
Correct.
for
Correct.
essentials, and rightly
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But that had, of course, adverse effect on our business,
Mm-hmm.
because our revenue became nil, and
Mm-hmm.
then most of our clients refused to pay us because they themselves were not sure what's going to happen to them.
Mm-hmm.
And our runway planning, went for a toss, right? So we never
Right.
planned for this kind of a scenario. And
Mm-hmm.
fortunately for us, at that point of time, our investors helped us out, and we were able to tide through that. And then when the pandemic opened up, suddenly, everybody wanted to jump onto our platform. The platform, existing brands were scaling multifold. New brands were trying to get onto our platform, and a lot of our existing clients came back to renegotiate with us, and that got us thinking that we can't have another scenario where 100% of our business is dependent on third parties,
Correct.
right? So we need to have some part of a business which is completely controlled by us, is
Mm-hmm.
captive to us, so that if such event happens again, we are not
Mm-hmm.
completely dependent on somebody else for our survival
Right.
itself.
I actually had a question
And
on
that's
that, on
yes, go
how
ahead.
you so I think personally it was a question that I had because I understand that Ace Total, has ever since its inception primarily been a tech company which offers, integration services by helping retail brands integrate their online and offline sales, into one seamless system, a unified commerce platform. But recently you have pivoted and shifted into a retail centered company as well, right? Which is licensed various popular brands like Lee Wrangler and Toys R Us and Babies R Us. So, what caused you to completely pivot back to entering the fashion retail industry? And what was the transition like? Is it because, like you said, you did not want 100% of your business to be completely solely based on third parties, or was there any other reason?
Well, that was the reason, to be honest, initially, right? That was
Mm-hmm.
it, initial, I would say, thesis on which we said, okay, we need to have some business which is captive to
Mm-hmm.
us, where we take all the decisions. And the second part of, that problem statement was because we also realized that, the enterprises, again, as I mentioned earlier, always has certain systems and processes, which were built for, that point of time, and becomes difficult for them to change and evolve with that.
Mm-hmm.
Then we so it then in a way prevents adoption of the technology, and hence the scalability, because for adoption you need to have systems to support it. You need to have the people working in the enterprise to support it. So people who were working in the enterprise in most cases were far more closer to the way they were doing business earlier, which was
Mm-hmm.
just the offline world, and has been doing the same way for years and years. And
Mm-hmm.
something new was coming along which required them to make certain changes in SOPs, and there was a bit of resistance coming in from that end as well. So we realized that there is an adoption issue, and if we have to scale, right, so adoption has to
Mm-hmm.
increase. So the advantage we saw in having our own captive brands was that, one, we will get revenue which is captive, because here we are, the business is captive to us.
Mm-hmm.
We are the ones who are doing end to end. And the second reason was that we will be able to drive adoption, right? So because we felt that at the highest level, if our clients were using maybe 20-25% of our platform, the power of the
Mm-hmm.
platform was not being harnessed because of some of these adoption challenges. So we said, okay,
Mm-hmm.
we could, show to our SaaS clients, let's see what you can do, and also drive adoption there. So the initial idea was that we will have the SaaS business to continue, and this will be the captive brands. And that's why we call that vertical captive brands, vertical internally as well. And I still remember, this captive business will become, about almost 50% of our SaaS business. So that was the initial thought process and ambition we had, because the idea was we'll
Right.
continue offering our technology to third parties, other brands, and we also have some captive brands. So for captive brands, we looked at which are which are the ones we should pitch, and at the same time, which are the brands which are also having problems globally, and also at the same time in India, where it would be easier for us to convert them. And that's how we made a list of brands and we started approaching them. And then
Right.
once we launched Lee Wrangler, which are the first two brands we signed, in the first 6 months itself, we were about 3.5 to 4x of our business plan. So it was very,
Wow.
very
Okay.
clear that
Wow.
the what where we need to focus on,
Mm-hmm.
because we also encounter newer problems. So commerce was only
Oh.
one problem, right? So there were other problems on demand forecasting, on supply chain, on the consumer side, on the brick and mortar side. It's a complete black box. How do you, solve that black box just the way it's being solved for online? There were plenty of problems to solve. So we said, okay, if we have to solve those problems, then we need our entire tech bandwidth to focus on solving these new problems. And if we have to do that, we can't support our SaaS clients. So we took the hard decision of letting go of the SaaS business and focusing on this side of the business to solve these new problems.
Right. So I think I was also reading a news article. You had actually interviewed for the business line, and I think a few months back in February, and I was reading something you had mentioned was Aristotle was going to launch a new brand every year for 3 years. So is that still a vision you hold? Is it because, I mean,
Yes.
what was the thought process behind that? If you could explain.
Yeah, because one of the things which I mentioned earlier is technology also makes the whole, it should make the whole business repeatable. So today, if you look at companies which are doing multiple brands, right? So you'll always find the challenge they have is that one brand is doing well, other brand is, maybe not doing so well.
Right.
Because what you're doing is you're trying to have the playbook again through operations, through operational efficiency, right? So, but the whole way we saw the whole model was that if tech plays an entire role, tech should be able to make the business model repeatable. So just to share with you, in our company, we don't even have one sales guy,
right?
Because we don't sell to anybody. That's how the whole model is, right? We don't have people in the regions for retail operations. There is nobody in the regions, in the retail operations as well. I mean, maybe we can talk a bit about it later. But coming back to it, so we said, okay, the model has to become repeatable, which means that we have to move away from tasks which are being manual tasks, which are very operational nature, and tech can take over those tasks. And we'll use a lot of automation to bring efficiency, scalability, and of course, all this data which we are getting, which we could harness for predictability as well. So that's where the whole model was built. So as we stand today, we launched, Lead Wrangler first. Then we launched, Toys R Us. Last year, we launched Toys R Us and Dockets. So two brands we launched last year. And next year, we're launching one more brand, which is already signed. That'll be launched in the second half of next year. The brand which is going to be launched in 26 actually is at the negotiation stage with the documentation stage actually for another brand which we're going to launch. So our pipeline is robust, for the launch of one new brand, for the next few years for sure.
Correct. So, right. So, I guess getting even more specific now about the Aristotle's operations. So, apart from using, this vertical e-commerce system and using, quite advanced integration technology in your licensed brands, which is interesting enough on its own, what would you say are some of the other exciting tech innovation that Aristotle has implemented, either in its own licensed brands or is looking to implement in, the retail industry in the future?
Yes, so now we're doing business only for our own brands. So using our own tech only for that sole purpose. One, because like I said, it helps in drive adoption. And second is we are able to experiment much faster. And we realize that, if you're going to do new things, experimentation will be at the heart of it. So we built the entire tech stack in a way that the cost of experimentation is very, very low, right? So, so that's how the whole model has been built. So I think that's one of the core pieces of our tech stack, that the cost of experimentation is very low, which enables us to keep on trying new things, learn, and keep building on things which are working, and also things which are not working to let go of them. I mean, every quarter we do 8 to 10 new things at least, and to be honest, one or two of them succeed. The rest of them don't succeed, right? And that's when we start building upon those 1 and 2, and then you come back to the next quarter again.
What would be an example of what would be an example of these few things that either succeed or don't succeed? Like just as
to give you an example of what not succeeded was that during the pandemic itself, right? We tried commerce on WhatsApp. But that didn't work. There was limitation of catalog, limitation on the platform. So that didn't, really work for us. So we let that go. So that was done. Then we tried auto pricing to say that, okay, can auto pricing work? Can system define what should be the price of this particular SKU? And how do you define the price? Because MRP is already given. So with that, you use the discount to, reduce or increase the price. Because what happens is in the earlier days, you will always do A/B testing, right? To say, okay, let me try on, with one set of customers, one discount, one set of customers, second discount. Let me see what kind of has worked better. And then maybe I interchange and see, okay, what has kind of worked better. And okay, that's how we should do. But in today's time, what technology empowers us to do and what we do on our platform is that we are able to test this at scale. There are hundreds of A/B testing scenarios equivalent which are running on the platform, and that data gets soaked in from the platform, and then it actually changes the price across all our channels on its own. So what we also did is that today, we might be the only company, I think, in India where our online offline price has parity. When I'm saying parity at all the time. So what happens is, let's say for auto pricing engine changes the pricing of an SKU, that on online, of course, through Rubicon, it will change the price. You will see on the listing pages, you will see the new price, right? That's an easy one to solve. But in offline, what happens is that you will change the price and POS, the point of sale system. But the customer doesn't see the point of sale system. Right. How do you communicate to them? Right. So it might have changed, but it's not really gone to the effect of the consumer. So all you got to do is what we did was that we employed these hardware of digital shelf talkers, which are on all the shelves. So the moment we do a price change, auto pricer changes the price. The price changes simultaneously on online, offline, everywhere.
Understood.
And then as we started doing it, we started realizing, okay, there are far more benefits, because since we installed this hardware which was connected to our software, we would know now is that what's lying on each shelf. So what's the rate of sale of each shelf? At the same time, we also realized that there were stocks in stores which were lying in the back stock. In the POS, it's showing it's inverted. So we think it's in the store, but it's not in the store because it's lying in the back stock, but it's not in the shelf. So if it's not in the shelf and offline environment, how will consumer see it? It will never sell. And you will think, okay, this sell-through is low and blah, blah, blah. Your data will all be wrong. And it's never got exposed to customer and so on and so forth. So then we learned this is possible. Then we went in that direction. Then we said, okay, why don't we also learn that, okay, what the customer is actually, trying, because that data is not coming to us. Right. So because just the way you an online funnel, we said, let's make an offline funnel. So today we know that what the customer is taking to the trial room and what products out of those went to the POS. So which is the ones the customer dropped, because in offline environment, first, the intent is very high if the customer's already walked in. Second is if they tried the product, which means, they like the product, and if they're not bought, so what products are dropping off? So, you build something and then you keep going deeper and deeper and you realize, there's a lot more, which you can build around. Let's just give you an example of, what kind of worked and how it just keeps going. And then there are now, so we are now building a planogram as well through tech. So that planogram program is being built again as a next level of extension of this, entire story.
Okay.
To say, okay, what should we produce? What should we have on each shelf? But that's still under production.
Wow. I think that's probably one of the most interesting things I've heard, having that sort of a hardware on the shelf where it reflects the changes in price. So I think being someone who's so invested in tech, what other emerging technologies do you see currently on the horizon that you think will have, the biggest impact on the future of retail? And I mean, if so, how is Ace Total preparing to leverage them to ensure that you as a firm stay ahead on that curve? Like, what do you see approaching on the horizon? What's the next big thing as far as retail tech is concerned?
See, first, I think how we approach things is that we don't, look at, what new technologies are available and then plan this thing around it. What we do is we identify our problems to say, okay, these are the problems which we can solve. And then what are the new technologies we can use to build our applications on top of it, right? So, to give you an example there, I think AI, I think it's going to have a transformative, role to play.
Definitely.
It already is doing, at least in our organization, we started using first Gen AI in particular for cataloging. This was done last year. Because the problem statement there was that every time you have to do, create a catalog, because otherwise how will consumers see, right? Especially online. So you need to create a catalog. To create a catalog, you need to take images, create different angles, backgrounds, so on and so forth. Then you have to write the content, etc. And then, it was a very manual process, which means more brands you have, larger teams you need, but at the same time, they will still have some lead time to deliver. So today what happens is our entire cataloging is done through Gen AI. So we have only 4 people which are in the catalog team, and their role is largely to work on the newer brands, to make sure the brand tonality is it being coming out in the content, and work with the tech team to fine tune those. So only these people manage the entire cataloging now, because everything is being, all the content, all the imaging is all being managed, through, Gen AI. And I think that was, and we've been working on that for some time. And the reality is, until OpenAI came up with their, initial API, that's when we started using that. And we see now, where it has evolved very, very rapidly. So I think, and I'll just give you one small example which solved, one problem. So today we are now working on something on the forecasting side, which actually the demo is set for tomorrow with me. I'll invite you to come over and actually also have a look at it. So they're gonna show me that what they have done, because this work has been going on for quite some time. What we are trying to do is we are trying to predict demand up to the SKU level, size level, in a short span of time. When I'm saying a short span of time, up to 6 weeks time. So the idea is we predict, our AI engine predicts that 6 weeks time, and then the entire process up to releasing of the PO to the factory is automated. So you say, okay, this is what is the demand's going to be. That's what my closing stock is. How much I need to produce. There are other factors of MOQs, fabric, etc. that is taken into consideration, and the PO is released through ERP, and it goes to the factory. So we are trying to do the entire process built on the back of the AI model which we are trying to use. So I think that's one area which we are very excited about, AI. I think it can be used across across the width and depth of the organization to transform things at a very, very massive scale. And as I mentioned before, that retail always has had enough data. It's also about how you harness it and use it. One more insight I would share with you, though I know it's not part of the question, but so one thing we also realized during a SaaS time was that, see, you give an insight to a team, in an enterprise, but every enterprise has some processes, SOPs, etc. So due to all of those, it takes a bit of time to execute that. Right. Retail is a very, very operations heavy business. So it also takes time, and the recency of that data is lost. The insight is lost because the recency is lost, because now the data has become old by the time it took an action. Right. So what our endeavor now has been, especially for the last 1 year, is that automate the entire task end to end, right? And then human mind should be used to analyze that what was okay, what's not okay, how can we improve that further, but don't interfere with the task at all. Let the task be completed by the machine, have end to end automation. So that's how we are trying to work. And how AI is solved is, AI has really solved a lot of our problems, and more importantly, has fast tracked a lot of things. The only worry I have is my cloud costs are going up dramatically. So I think that's one area which we have parallelly started to work on, that how do we make sure that we don't it doesn't cost us the cost of experimentation, because on AI the cost of experimentation is also very, very high.
Understood.
But AI for sure will be transformative, undoubtedly. It will be as big as internet was, the launch of internet. I think that's how big AI is going to be.
Right. Something that I've heard everywhere, how big AI is going to be. But I guess moving on to something a little more individualistic, to yourself, as the CEO and the leader of your company, leadership style is something that becomes extremely important, and it varies again from leader to leader, CEO to CEO, and that's a fact. But the point remains, it is again very, very important to shaping how successful your firm is. So how would you define your leadership style? What are the few things that you require from people, and what are the few things you try to follow? What are the sort of guidelines or rules that you try to stick to or abide by? What would you say is your leadership style?
I think what I expect from the teams, and to be honest, people who work with me, I'm quite vocal about it, is say it as it is, right? So don't sugarcoat things. Bad news should travel fast, right? Between us, good news even comes a bit later. It's okay, but bad news requires an immediate action to be taken. It can do more damage. So I think the communication layers, and and more importantly, enable them to say that, okay, it's okay to try new things. It's okay to make mistakes. You will not be punished, for making a mistake, because that's where, innovation experimentation fails. So I see my role to enable the innovation, across the organization, enable the communication, or remove the communication hurdles, so that, that communication is happening fast, and also to make sure, most importantly, not just my immediate reportees, that they are also passing on the same thing to their teams and so on and so on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Understood. Understood. And I think another question that I had was, uh, I think if you had to wrap it up as a lesson, what would you say you've some a significant lesson that you've learned, keeping in mind the challenges that you faced, like you've said in your previous responses, what would you say would be a significant lesson you've learned that has had a lasting impact on how you approach life, how you approach managing your firm, how you approach, talking to people? Has there been like a significant event or lesson that you've learned that has, really shaped how you started to approach things?
Two things, I think. One is resilience, right?
Okay.
So I think that's very, very important
Mm-hmm.
because in a startup's life, you will have the highs and the lows,
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
especially where you're in the tech space, where there
Mm-hmm.
is experimentation, which costs money and time, and hence runway. So how to manage these experimentation as well, so that you do not slow that down and again have the same problem which most of the organizations we feel when they are smaller, they're far more innovative, and they get larger, right? So the innovation kind of stops, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think I would say these would be the two things. One more thing I
Mm-hmm.
would like to add is to anybody who has entrepreneurial ambitions is that
Mm-hmm.
don't underestimate the power of your network.
Okay.
You'll be amazed that how people will help you where you do not expect help from,
Mm-hmm.
and it always comes at the cost of your personal time.
Mm-hmm.
So every Saturday, including this, is where I spend only on meeting people who are not directly related to my business. So whatever is to
Wow.
my
Okay.
business, I do Monday to Friday. Saturday,
Mm-hmm.
I'm only meeting people.
Mm-hmm.
So people reach out to meet. I always push them on Saturday. So
Mm-hmm.
typically, my time is from 12 to 5. I
Mm-hmm.
devote to meeting new people
Mm-hmm.
whom I've reached out to or they've reached out to me. And you always learn something or the other. And I've always seen
Mm-hmm.
the power of network is amazing where,
Mm-hmm.
if you need something from somebody, you ask somebody. 9 out of 10 people would not say no. And five
Mm-hmm.
out of 10 people will actually go ahead and do it,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Wow.
And the others were not doing it because they don't want to do it. Others will not do it because they're not able to do it, right? It might be a
Mm-hmm.
issue or something which you need. They might not be able to do it for you, but that's the power of network. And then what happens is when you do something for someone, that person will also try in their whole concept of reciprocity. Will
Mm-hmm.
also try
Right.
and give back, and
Right.
that helps the entire network,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's how the network expands. So it's about creating a link in real life. So even today when I travel, right, I just came
Mm-hmm.
back from UK 2 days back.
Right.
I always keep extra days to meet new people who are not directly related to my work or my business at all,
Mm-hmm.
and who are not just friends, but they become friends overall. When you start meeting them, and you learn so much, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
if you come to the office next time, I'll show you. We have something on the wall, and I think it was said by I think Adam Schwartz, who unfortunately
Mm-hmm.
died too young. Very
Yeah.
very smart mind, right? So he said that innovation is not about building something new. Innovation is about what you learned in another business area and applying to a new business area.
Mm-hmm.
So when you meet people from somebody else and they're
Mm-hmm.
talking about something else
Right.
which
Right.
they have
Right.
used, and you figure out, okay, how can that I use for my
Yeah.
business? And I think
Yeah. It's
that's
like a
also
win-win
that's amazing.
situation.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's for budding entrepreneurs.
Right. I think that's a great lesson for, people like me. Networking has been something that's been said to be extremely important. But, like you said, even someone at a level like yours, keep one day Saturday for meeting completely new people who are not related to your business. I think that really helps. And to wrap things up here, something that's been at the back of my mind for a while now. So you said stuff about how you barely have personnels in your physical stores, and then you also mentioned how end-to-end automation. I was also wondering how end-to-end automation could also help reduce like the number of people. So that's actually quite interesting when I first heard about it, that you have very, very few people actually working in the stores because you have everything that's so tech
Yeah,
driven.
so we do have
So,
people working in the store, and we have people
mhm.
working in the office, but we don't have people in the middle to manage these stores, which typically
Okay.
the retail operations
Yeah,
teams and sales
exactly.
team which organizations have.
Exactly.
We don't have that because the whole
Mm,
logic is that if you are capturing all data points in the store, that is far more useful. To give you an
mm-hmm.
example, is we launched our own app, which we call Connect. And what
Okay.
Connect does is, because the whole idea of launching Connect was, can we bring in all real operations onto Connect? Why? Because then we will have all these data points coming to us. Once you start digitizing everything, you will have a data point for it. Once you have that data, then you can, bring in efficiency and
Mm-hmm.
hopefully, predictability to improve it
Mm-hmm.
further. So I think that's how the endeavor is to do, go across everything and solve the dark store problem instead of finding to throw, people at it to say, okay, let me have people visit the stores. I mean, if you want people to visit the store, they can't be there at all the time, right? The
Mm-hmm.
store guys are there all the time. How do you make sure you enable them, and how do you make sure that you're capturing what is happening, everything in the store in the form of data, which you can utilize, and do something about it.
Correct, correct. So I think that wraps up everything that I've had to say. Another extremely insightful episode of the Economic Lens. I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to our incredible guest, Mr. Nitin, for sharing his experience as a very successful entrepreneur. And I hope his journey was as interesting to our viewers as it was to me. I mean, I've learned some extremely fascinating things. Uh, to all our listeners, thank you for tuning in. I hope you found today's conversation as enlightening and motivating as I did. Again, Mr. Nitin, we're so grateful for your time and for generously sharing your perspective with us. Thank you and have a good day.